Namaskar and welcome to the 17th edition of World Education Summit. And it's an honor to have Shri Anil Swarup ji here with us. Sir is the former Secretary, School Education of Government of India. He was earlier at a senior positions in the health department and various other departments of the government. And he's known for the reforms he has taken, innovations he has done in each department he has been into, either at a district level or a state level or at the central level. And more recently, he has been in the news because of the book he has written, which has almost become the Bible for every civil servant in the country. It's called Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. Sir, it's always a great pleasure to listen to you. I have been I have listened to you in our World Education Summits when you have given your speeches there, and all the audience has been always been thrilled and excited. And this is a virtual edition of the World Education Summit, which we are holding in these pandemic times. And sir, since you have a distinction of working in the government and in the education sector, and you also, of course, have worked at the district, at the state government level in long periods of time. What the audience today is comprising of school directors, school CEOs, school teachers, preschool owners, and edtech companies. So it's a mixed audience, which is like that. So I will be having this chat regarding some of the issues they have been raising in this forum and earlier like education forums which you have done. And in this, there is a backdrop of national education policy we have, which was getting discussed when you were in the department. And there is a background of COVID disruption, which has anyway put the whole school education, the ecosystem in a totally new path right now. And also there is a backdrop of huge discussions happening around jobs, employability, the future of jobs, creativity in education, and things like that. So first, sir, the question which is everyone wants to I think talk to you is that there are two parallel systems of education running in India. One is the government-led or government-driven school education system, which is government-funded or public exchequer funded, and there is a private sector school education running in this country, and both are in a like having their own sets of challenges, which some are similar, but some are highly different. So since sir, you have worked in at the district level, state level, where all that operations happen, where the whole action happens on the ground, how do you see, sir, like how has the school education and the government schools especially has evolved over the last 2-3 decades, and what like how do you reflect on it, sir? Over to you, sir.
First, thank you very much, Ravi, for inviting me here. It was always a pleasure to be a participant in your conferences. They are so well attended, well informed people around. It's a pleasure interacting with them. So thank you very much for inviting me here. School education has evolved enormously over the past 2-3 decades. From a literacy rate of pretty low, now we've got a pretty high literacy rate. School-going children, the numbers have improved quite dramatically. Right now, almost every child goes to a school. So I think if you look at the success of the variety of school interventions in terms of government schools and otherwise, I think the first step has been taken. The child has been by and large brought to the school. Secondly, I think by and large the infrastructure for the school is also there. So these were the fundamental requisites for delivering school education, which were missed in the first decade since India got independence. Thereafter, I think the efforts of the government have borne fruit and the child has come to the school, and the schools have reasonable amount of infrastructure. There is always scope for improvement though. But the problem is the quality of education that gets delivered. The child, though, has come to school for a variety of reasons, one of them being the midday meal scheme, where my minister used to say that Ana, Khana or Jana, and thereafter not learning much. So the learning outcomes have not improved. That's a real challenge now in most of the government schools, and all the surveys, the National Achievement Survey and otherwise, have all pointed towards this direction, that the learning outcomes have not improved as they should have. So that's the challenge that the government faces. I'm glad that the new national education policy attempts to address some of these issues in the context of how to improve learning outcomes. And there, of course, I'll tell you as we go along, what are the actual steps that the national education policy articulates in terms of improving delivery of school education in the country. So briefly speaking, what has already happened is child has started coming to the school, the infrastructure is there, but the problem is that the learning outcomes are not there. And since you mentioned my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I touch upon a number of such aspects that require to be addressed in order to improve the quality of education.
So, it would be, sir, a great idea if you can talk about the salient points which you have recommended in your book, and also some of the points which NEP has looked into for improvement of education.
Okay, so what I have done in my book is to identify the problems of school education in the country, and to take you give you a bit of a background, because I was there when this national education policy was being formulated. Very interestingly, when Dr. Kasturi Rangan came to meet me, he asked me about my suggestions for the school education policy or the education policy. I told him, "You're wasting your time." He was a bit surprised. I told him, unless you have a clear-cut action plan associated with the policy itself will not help. But I'll come to that later on. What I have tried to do in my book is to identify the crux of the problem. Before I became Education Secretary, I was Coal Secretary, as you are aware. And in coal, it is known for mafias. And in the 2 years that I was there, I tried to sort out that mafia problem. When I came to education sector as school education secretary, I thought that I am coming out of dark dungeons of coal mines into bright lights of school education. But to my utmost horror, I discovered that the mafias in school education were operating underground, whereas in coal, mining was underground and mafias were overground. In education, it was the other way around. So there were sorts of mafias, and I've listed out those mafias and explained them in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. And let me touch upon some of those mafias, because these issues are now getting settled in the national education policy. I think the biggest mafia that works in school education, as I discovered in the 2 years that I was there, is the B.Ed and D.El.Ed mafia. Out of the 16,000 so-called B.Ed and D.El.Ed colleges, I discovered to my utmost horror that 4,000 of them did not exist and they could give you a degree. So that was the level of problem. Now, how does the national education policy address that? National education policy says that there would now be a 4-year B.Ed course. Now, all these fraudulent colleges will have to close shop. They'll have to take fresh accreditation, consequent to which they can be weeded out. So that's one. The second is the selection of teachers. Now, as you might be aware, one of the former chief ministers is behind the bars for the racket that is there in selection of teachers. And there are other rackets in other states also. So what the policy does is it sets in place a separate and new teacher admission or teachers entrance test, the TET test, so that this can be taken care of. Now, the beauty of the policies, which I have identified in my book also, the teacher lies at the pivot of school education. If you don't address issues related to teachers' education, I don't think quality of education will improve. It will not. You might be aware that there are states, and there was a recent news item also, 20 to 25% of teachers don't go to the school at all. And look at the quality of teachers that we have. Now, all that is attempted to be addressed. So the best part of the policy to me is the focus on the teacher that they have. And by the way, this will not involve too much of investment, because there are other provisions of the policy like early childhood education, which is a brilliant suggestion. I think all researchers have revealed that the brain of the child gets formulated in the first 5-6 years. So he has to be given some intervention. Similarly, the policy also talks about teaching in mother tongue. Here again, the research says that a child can understand complex concepts in his mother tongue. Similarly, the policy lays focus on vocational training. You talked about employability. Now, a person who does his BA and MA in history and sociology, what are the options available to get employed? But if he gets skilled, if he gets vocational training, he's likely to get employment. And that again finds place in the national education policy. I think there are wonderful provisions in the national education policy, the flexibility, the overall development. All these are very good. My only problem with the policy is that the policy talks about 6% of GDP going to education. Now, this was also said by Dr. Kasturi Rangan long ago, but this 6% has not come, and I don't see it coming. Now, if that money does not come, how do you go about implementing the provisions in policy? And that is why I say the provisions relating to teachers do not require so much financial intervention, and the impact will be phenomenal. And hence, the focus has to be in implementing issues or policies or suggestions given in the policy for teachers.
Sir, let me put forth a question which someone sent me on a social media that please ask it to Mr. Swarup. So I think, and that was a bit of a different line of a question, and I hope you have already heard about this idea that some of the people have propagated that there should be a voucher system in schools. Let the citizens get a voucher of X rupee cash, and let them decide that they want to send their children to government school or a private school. I think the thought, one of the thought processes which is being discussed for many years, that the amount of money which the government spends per students on a government school is in many states is perhaps much higher than a private school. Like in Bangalore, there was a study, and the broader question is that should, as a government has allowed private sector to operate in many other sectors like health sector and other sectors in a big way, and also is now promoting it in a incentivizing the private investment in school, in other sectors. Should the government, instead of putting so much energy and resources in improving the government school education system, but there are always people finding a way how to reduce attendance of teachers, dummy teachers are attending the schools, doing mafias in the teacher selection process and all that stuff. So you are finding a solution, and they have another way to counter that. So should government put as much effort also in promoting private entrepreneurs in school education? Sir, over to you.
Since you again mentioned my book, there's a full chapter on this issue, but let me explain this to you.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms that I have of the policy is that the policy treats private sector as a paria, as a touch me not, which surprises me. The reason is very simple, and I built this argument from what I said earlier. Now, government is not going to get in 6% of GDP for education. Where is that money? Where could it have come from? That could have easily come from the private sector. I don't know why is this reservation for private sector, because in all other sectors, as you said, they are allowing private sector. As Secretary Education, I knew that private schools are making profit. They are not calling it profit. So why aren't we legitimately allowing it to be called profit and taxing it? Government will get money and they will be able to fund it. So this is as far as the private sector is concerned, because we must appreciate one point. Around 50% of the children go to private schools, and the policy hardly talks about private sector. I'm not even talking of incentivization. I'm only saying recognize them, facilitate them. You don't have to go out of the way to help them. But if you keep them at a distance, if you treat them as touch me not, then of course you are disincentivizing. I'm not even saying incentivize them. Don't incentivize them. Recognize the important role that the private sector is playing. This is as far as the general principle is concerned. Coming to specific, there is a separate chapter in my book which talks precisely of the system that you're saying. The point here is, apart from the expenditure that the government is incurring in government schools, which it should, why shouldn't I give a choice to the student to decide where he wants to study? So, for example, if the government is investing 10,000 rupees per annum, I would give this entitlement of 10,000 rupees to the child and allow him to go both to the government and private school, bring in competition. Let him take a call, let him have that choice. The quality of school education, incentivize the school also. If they get more children, let some more money flow into that particular school. You can do that. You know, it's similar to the scheme that I was doing in RSPY. In fact, at that point in time, I had written an article in 2010 in which I had said that the smart card given for RSBY could also be used for creating entitlement for a child for education, where like in health, he could choose between public and private hospital, he could choose between public and private school. So it wouldn't be wasted. It would go for the purpose for which, and then evaluations could be done. And the market will evaluate. If the child prefers to go to private school, it's a clear indication that he prefers to go there, and let competition evolve. Now, this is not to say that the government should not invest or look into government schools. It's the primary job of the government. But why not enable private sector to do that? As I said, in ethical dilemmas of a civil servant and in not just a civil servant. In both, I've spoken about this idea, elaborated it on how it can be done. In fact, in my career, it was only as education secretary that I felt I probably should have had more time. As coal secretary, within a year and a half, I had made myself totally redundant. I had gone to PMO to tell them to wind up the ministry. But in education, the problem is so deeply entrenched that you require more time. And I had started this experiment. I had spoken to a chief secretary to experiment this voucher system in 2 districts. But as luck would have it, in education, changes don't come about overnight. It takes a much longer time. I'm out, and now the government is, or no, I shouldn't say government. I think the policy is talking about keep private sector at a distance. We are still stuck in 90s as far as school education is concerned. In all other sectors, we'll come out of it. I don't know when we'll come out of this.
Sir, thanks for highlighting this aspect of this private education. And sir, as you mentioned about a socialist mindset, and as we are aware that a lot of private sector investment is anyway happening in the private schools. And yeah, like I was on a panel yesterday with the school principal and some of the school owners in the World Education Summit, and one of the complaints they have that in this pandemic, they are the people who ran the education of millions of children in this country. But not once the government, like any of the state governments, came out to say that parents are requested to pay the fees so that school teachers can be paid salaries. So they have this pain that they are not even recognized by the state governments, district authorities, and they are seen as someone like who is a lutera. So how does the like we create more awareness about that education is important, and the people who are providing education, either in the government or the private sector, have to be respected, and at least they have a right to earn their salaries. So they were like having this discussion. Yeah. So
the problem here is, it is not that the government does not realize that education is important. They know that it is important. Everyone knows. But that's my understanding in my government, is that there is this apprehension, which I call the socialistic apprehension, that if they allow private sector to come in, it may not be politically beneficial to them. I think it's totally wrong. But that's what the thought process is. Otherwise, I can't see any reason for government not allowing private sector to flourish in school education. For any idea to fructify in a country like ours, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, and judicially tenable. On all the last 5 counts, private sector education is absolutely fine. It is financially viable, it is technologically feasible, it's socially desirable, it is judicially tenable, it is administratively doable, all 5 things. It is only in the political front, and that too erroneously, there is probably a belief that if you open up the school education sector, politically it may not be beneficial. I don't agree with that. I think we have not been able to argue that sufficiently or cogently or comprehensively to the political masters to tell him and convince him that it is not politically not beneficial to you. It will benefit you politically in the long run because it will improve the quality of education in the country. Now, instead of doing that, we've been only harping on. The other reason could be there is a whole segment of government teachers, and there's some very fine government teachers as well, who play a huge political role in determining how education should be delivered in this country. This is not to, as I keep saying, there are absolutely outstanding government teachers, but there are a lot of them who are not teaching, who are only politicking, who are participating in politics. In fact, in some of the states, there are MLCs selected out of these teachers. So they are into politics big time. So they have an important role to play. Now imagine a scenario if the focus, if even if it not shifts, if it gets shared with the private sector, where will these guys go? So someone will have to think about it. I mean, some minister someday will have to think, and this is a political decision. This is not an administrative decision. Some government probably someday will take that decision. I was surprised by the policy recommendation because I asked some of these guys, how many of your children are going to public government schools? Those were there in the committee. None of them were sending children to the government school. And yes, they were ignoring the private school. My contention is, don't allow private sector schools to exploit. Now you have a very vibrant legislation in UP which enables, and this was brought about, the school owners, everyone sitting together, they came up with legislation which was accepted by the government where fee is regulated. So I'm not saying leave it free for all. There could be a system of regulation, but why? Why not encourage private sector? I'm at my wit's end. I can have some explanation, but I don't know why it is happening. And secondly, during my tenure as Secretary of School Education, again, there is a chapter in my book, I made a very conscious effort to foster public-private partnership. I am convinced that the education space is such that government alone cannot do it. It has to do it in conjunction. There are so many models in the country of public-private partnership in school education that are working brilliantly. We need to understand them, we need to appreciate them, we need to replicate. In fact, the movement that I've started post-retirement, the Nexus of Good, is focused on school education, apart from other segments. Why? Because I believe good work or efficient work will come from the private sector, scale will come from the government. I don't think we should distrust each other. We should come together and promote school education, because bottom line is not government and private. These are tools and instruments. Bottom line is the quality of education for the child. So the child is the end. It's not public or private. If that can happen through a partnership, have it. If it can be done only by government, please do it. If it can be done only by private, do it. But my understanding is it has to be done in cooperation with each other.
Yes. Sir, another, like as you mentioned about PPP, and you also mentioned in your book, some of the states have collaborated with the private sector, and they have given their public health centers to be run by the private sector in the health sector. Similarly, it has happened in some of the schools, but it is not yet taken in a big way as it should have been in the education, like school education. And I think in health also, after this COVID impact has happened, there is a great realization occurring in several states that their health infrastructure is not good enough, and they need private investments proactively in the health sector. And I think a similar realization about the urgency of the education in the rural area is not there, and it's like hidden, health as a disaster. When people start dying, you can see it. But people, if they remain uneducated, you can't see it. Like it doesn't hurt us directly. It's that the reason that reforms are not happening as it should be.
You have actually hit the nail on the head. In my book, I try and understand myself. Why don't things happen in education? The reason is very simple. In health, in other things, the consequences are visible immediately. In education, the consequences will emerge 5 years, 10 years down the line. Now here everybody is busy on yesterday and tomorrow. Who's bothered about 5 years down the line? And that is one reason why education is given more lip service than actual service. You know, frankly speaking, everyone talks about increasing the budget of education. In the year 2014 to 2018, when I was there as Education Secretary, I was there between 16 and 18, the actual elevation in real terms for school education came down. And we are talking of school education. I have written in my book, I was the 5th school education secretary in 2.5 years of the government. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, the decision maker is not so hassled or bothered because the consequences will come much later. And that's why I told Dr. Kasturiranjan, I told him that your policy will be an agglomeration of ideas. But until you have an action plan clearly outlining what needs to be done, how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done, it will just be discussed. And I got so employed after the announcement of the education policy that I have never been employed so much while as Secretary of Education, because everyone wants to discuss. So I'm discussing. And imagine an editor of a leading English daily rings me up and she asked me, "Sir, can you write 800 words on education policy?" I said, "I'll do that, no problem." Said, "We'll pay you 20,000 rupees. I said, "I have never got so much money per word ever in my life." And for education policy. So look at the employment that gets generated as a consequence policy. There should be more action generated, and that can be done only through an action plan. The tragedy is that the policy does not have an elaborate action plan. That has been left to the mandarins, and I'm glad to say we have one of the finest set of officers in the education department now. It has been left to them to do it. Now, policy took 6 years, and these officers are being driven mad to implement policy in next 6 months. Look at how it works. It doesn't work that way. If in those 6 years when the policy was formulated, what stopped the policy givers to add a few chapters on implementation? Because had they done that, they would have looked at the implementability of the ideas that they were giving. It's very easy. In UP, we call them Rai Sahibs. You give a Rai and walk away. You give an advice. Now, how do you go about doing it? That's where the problem is. In India, the problem is not of policies and ideas. The problem is implementation, and hence a chapter or 2 or 3 or 4 should have been added on the how part of it, because then they would have realized where is the money coming from, or is it wishful thinking? Now you are talking, giving so much brilliant. I am appreciative of the policy. It's probably one of the finest documents that has come out with ideas, but it doesn't talk about where the money is going to come. It's wishfully thinking 6% of GDP. Now, if I were there, I would have said, okay, if 6% of GDP comes, all the ideas will be implemented. Let us assume 6% is not available and we get only 3%. What is the priorities that you discuss? What are the priority items that you will do first? That is sort of discussion that should have gone in the policy. I mean, giving ideas, writing a lovely paper or a book has been going on in this country for a long time. Now we have this expensive paid advisors from across the Atlantic who come here, give ideas and go back because they find the terrain here too hot to handle, go back to cool climes of the US and sit there again, pontificate from there. What's this going on? We've had this for so many years. Someone should be able to walk the talk. Merely talking doesn't help. And that seems to be happening. We have a policy, but as I said, I'm so glad you have such finest set of officers in the school education department. I'm sure they're going to make the best out of the policy that is given to them.
Sir, there is a long way. Sorry. Yeah. There is a long way when the policy gets implemented, as you mentioned about a 6 months plan. It may take some more time going down in each of the state and the districts. Asking you a immediate questions, and since I follow you on the social media, and I can see that IAS officers across the country follow you like anything. So what's your message to the state education secretaries right now who are on their job, DMs, collectors, divisional commissioners who are right now in each of the districts? They are interacting with the government education school system every day, and they have immediate problems to solve. So what's your message to them, that what immediate actions they can take in the current framework of the funding policy, everything, to make the government school education system better without violating any law? Yeah.
I have been engaging with state governments through the AGs of Nexus of Good. I've been engaging with district officers also. And my advice has been as follows. Number one, to the state government, I have been suggesting to them, and there are a few that approached me. I have told them to identify such aspects of the policy that do not require too much financial intervention. So, for example, as I said in the beginning, in case of teachers, if you get down to implementing the B.Ed part of the recommendation and have 4-year course, you will end up getting actually qualified teachers who will come in. Number one. Number two, if you can set right your teacher entrance test that they have, which has been suggested in the policy, it does not require too much intervention, you can do it. If you can continuously train the teachers as has been suggested in the National Education Policy through a Diksha portal, which was set up when I was there, it's a very vibrant portal, very useful portal. Teachers can be improved. So there are certain aspects of the policy that can easily be implemented without too much of financial intervention. And I'm glad many states are working towards that. So that is likely to happen, and that will help school education. At the district level, and even at the state level, what I have also been suggesting, there are good models. Again, policy should have mentioned those policy initiative. There are good models that are already working in some of the states. Other states can learn from it. We can learn from each other. You know, you don't have to go to Timbuktu. I remember when I came education secretary, some guy from across the Atlantic came and told me, sir, why don't you go to England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, New Zealand, all the lands of the world? And I asked him, have you seen motherland? He didn't understand my question. But I went around the country and found some outstanding work being done in the field. No one knows about them. So my contention and my approach in Nexus Good is also to highlight those. 2 days ago, we had a webinar in which 22,000 people participated. And in that, we highlighted some good work being done on some of the states in terms of aggregation of schools, in terms of teachers, what good practices they have been able to evolve in terms of teachers transfers. Because that's a racket, another racket. So what I'm trying to do is to get those practices on board, give it back to other states to learn from them. That's the idea. I don't think we can revolutionize it. I'm not a revolutionary in any case. I feel that there's a lot of good work that is already happening. I have suggested to the states and districts, so much material is now available on Nexus Good. You can actually go and look at it, understand, approach these people and replicate it. It's much easier to replicate an existing practice in the country than importing one from abroad and doing a proof of concept. So that's my advice to them.
Sure. And your like as you mentioned about look around for the good practices which have already happened, replicate them. Also, sir, like you might have come across, and I think you have mentioned in your several articles which I have been reading. Even many of the private schools are looking at collaborating or supporting their nearby government school entities. And but they don't like they are not able to easily work with the local governments to do that. So PPP at a very local level, at a CSR level, and if the that is the way out for small interventions to happen in each of the districts. One school is being adopted either by a corporate or either by a nearby school. So do you think that these models can be encouraged by DMs and collectors?
Certainly, it's already happening actually. It's already happening in a number of places. There are 2-3 models that are working. One, at the municipal corporation level, because all the schools of municipal corporation are located very well, their infrastructure, but the schools are in a bad shape. So a number of NGOs have taken them over. I'm the only trust which I am on board right now, school-related trust, is the Muktangan Trust. It runs a few municipal schools and they are as good as any private schools. So they have taken the infrastructure of the school, they have refurbished the whole thing, got teachers, and they have proved that a public-private partnership of this sort can work. Then there are other, in Delhi there are such models, there are other places where there are such models. That's one such model. The second model is that a private school adopts a school, which in turn it doesn't take over, so to say, it's functioning, but certain aspects of the school. This can also be done because it is being done. So what really needs to be done is to roadshow these success stories. You know, once you see good happening or success happening, you start believing that it can happen. Otherwise, it's an academic discussion like a policy. You know, you say this should happen, this should happen. Once you demonstrate the efficacy of a particular idea working on the ground, the acceptability becomes that much easier and better for the person who wants to do it. So there's a lot that is happening, but a lot more needs to happen. It needs to be replicated and scaled. And as I said, that's the whole objective of Nexus of Good. We are trying to do through that.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. I think this initiative which you have taken up is serving a large cause of the nation. And I want to ask you that, sir, in the smart city program of the government of India, there's an interesting component about education, school education, that in the smart cities, municipal corporations are supposed to make their schools smarter with the IT tools. So, do you find it interesting that a urban department doing making a focus on school education? Does that give you some hope here?
I don't think you've picked up the right example.
Okay.
I hope someone evaluates these smart cities. This was announced more than 6 years ago. A lot of dirty water has flown in Yamuna since then. We must try and understand how much of it has actually happened. I can tell you I was in the government at that point in time. For a year and a half, no one knew what was smart city. Everyone had his own definition of smart city. And even now, I've yet to come across examples of cities who have actually become smart. I have written an article on that. I have compared smart city with Swachhata Abhiyan. And I have tried to demonstrate why Swachhata Abhiyan happened and why smart cities didn't. We must try and appreciate that. So I don't think smart city can make schools smart. Let the cities become smart. Let school be handled by somebody else.
But sir, one of the problems which people think that there is a problem in the school education is that the administration at the local level is not as much trained or as much motivated to run the local schools very efficiently. So like the concept, like at a conceptual level, at least the smart city says that let each of the municipal corporation take up this initiative to make our city smart. So at least at the conceptual level, in each state, it's like
Ravi, we can discuss concepts endlessly. I have no problem with that. I go by concepts that have worked. So let us look at what happened in Rajasthan. Let us look at what happened in Chhattisgarh, and let us look at what happened in Karnataka. These guys actually got engaged with schools and improved the quality of school education. Let's learn from them. Why are we talking about a concept which is, I don't know whether it has worked. I couldn't disagree with what you're saying, what the smart city concept says, but has it worked anywhere in 6 years? If it hasn't worked in 6 years, I'm not discussing it. Let it work somewhere and then I'll discuss it. I'm talking of models that have actually worked. Look at the way Rajasthan managed to improve the quality of education. Right from the bottom of evaluations, they've gone to the top. Look at what happened in Karnataka. And all this happened through public-private partnership, mind you. They are examples to be emulated. And I keep telling people from UP, and they're doing now a fine job, that you don't have to talk about Kerala, because when you talk of Kerala, they say it's very far off and different. Agree. But Rajasthan is not different. If Rajasthan could do it, why can't UP do it? So why can't UP learn from Rajasthan? That's my take, actually. We talk of too many of revolutionary ideas, and because we are very smart, because we talk of smart ideas, we'll have discussions with people like you, and there will be more discussions, there will be further discussions, there will be more responses, everyone will discuss, nothing will come out of it. My contention to you, you have an organization, please make an assessment of smart cities. I know you will not be able to go public because it will impact your business, but do make an evaluation of smart cities and then stop talking about smart cities. The point is, what has actually happened on the ground? I have recently written an article. Why don't we evaluate such things? Let there be a third-party evaluation. Let everyone know what has actually happened on the ground. Because conceptually, we talked of Make in India. Let some third party evaluate what is Make in India. The lion rode and rode and rode. How many steps it has taken? We don't look into that. Because the sexier part is concept, ideas, PITA, organizations, all the jazz around it. But look at the brass tacks. What has actually happened on the ground? Until unless we appreciate the ground reality, we will never be able to improve it. We will live in the surreal world of announcements and all the occasions of lion roaring, people going all over the world. What has happened to make in India in India? So is the case with smart cities. Why can't we learn from the success stories of Swachh Bharat? Why can't we learn the success stories of Ayushman Bharat? Why are we talking of smart cities? I think someone has to sit down with a cool head and try and analyze why and which things have happened, why and which things haven't happened, and that's the way forward.
Sir, if you can, you mentioned about Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, and Karnataka. I think for the benefit of the audience, if you can briefly talk about it, I think like that may inspire people.
There is a full-fledged, again, as I said, it's there in my book. I've explained what it is, but let me briefly tell you.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems in school education relates to the teachers, as I said in the beginning. Now, these states that I mentioned, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, and Rajasthan, managed to handle the teacher-related issue. How did they do that? Number one, they created a database where you knew which teachers were working where. I'll give you an example of UP, and it happened in other states also. I was told they are short by 83,000 teachers in all. A detailed analysis revealed they are surplus by 63,000 teachers. How? Because the vacancies were determined district-wise and recruitment happened. Thereafter, those teachers got themselves transferred to Kanpur, Lucknow, Meerut, and Agra, and where the vacancies were, vacancies remained. So they counted the vacancies, and vacancies were always there. So the management of teacher is critical. Look at the way Rajasthan did it. They set up a portal. In fact, the Diksha portal that we set up was based on the learnings from what they did in Rajasthan. You can drill down to every child, every teacher in that portal. You can know who that teacher is, where that teacher is, what all he has been trained in. All the entire history, geography of that teacher is there. Once you have that data, then you can determine how to position him, how to train him, what to do to him. Right now, because of the lack of transparency in management of teachers in some of the states, everyone is having a ball, but suffering is. Similarly, in Karnataka, they have such a transparent policy of transfer of teachers that all politics have gone away. So the teacher can concentrate instead of trying to catch hold of a politician to get his transfer, can focus on study. Secondly, the training of teachers has become much more scientific in states like Rajasthan, in states like Karnataka, so they get better trained. The entrance exam is totally transparent in these two states. You can't give a sifaris to recruit a teacher. So there's so many things that have been done in Rajasthan. The consolidation of school. Policy came, education policy, Right to Education Act came, and it laid down certain parameters of opening schools. Of course, it was left to the state government, but the state adopted the central parameter. Now, what has that resulted in? In Rajasthan, you have a school which has 5 children, 3 children, and 2 teachers. In some schools, there are 100 children and 1 teacher. So there was total irrational. First, they collected the data, then they analyzed the data, and they corrected it. They consolidated schools. Now, that consolidation experiment is being implemented in Jharkhand. Consolidation has worked in Karnataka, it's happening in Odisha. So these are the things that are easily, they don't require financial intervention. They may not be very easy. Politically, you have to sell to the local people that the child will not be deprived of education. Now, Rajasthan did that. How did they do that? They came to me, the secretary came to me when I was Secretary Government of India, the state secretary came to me. He said, how do I take the child from this village to a school that's slightly far off? Because earlier he had a school next door, but that school had only 10 children. So what did we do? We came up with a transportation allowance scheme. We allowed this child the transportation. So you can find solutions if you want to. One has to look into those solutions.
Amazing. So if all these like success stories exist, as you mentioned, in Rajasthan, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, what is the barrier? Why it's not getting replicated in other states? Like, aren't people aware about it?
I'll tell you the barrier. I'll tell you. First, the barrier is we want everything published in the newspaper tomorrow morning. So if I don't have an event, it will not get published tomorrow. So I am an event management company. So if you are an event management company, you will not have time to indulge in these brass tack details. So large number of people are only trying to roadshow their tiger or lion, because that roars and everyone listens. No one looks at brass tacks. That's one. Second, I don't think we take pride in talking about success stories. We take pride in talking about concepts and ideas. because they have not been assessed, and you'll be looked at as an intellectual. I came across so many intellectuals who had brilliant ideas, and everyone wants to discuss ideas. Because many of those that have ideas have never walked, they only talked. So to look at those people who had walked, you should have also the generosity to appreciate someone else's work. हम कंजूस हैं. We don't appreciate others' work because only I can do good work, others can't do good work. So if that is the case, how can I look at it? When I look at that, then I find reason not to do it because I want to do it in my own way. You can cut across these barriers because I've seen it. I've given a number of examples in my book where the ideas have actually scaled. A Nexus of Good is doing that again. It can be done, it should be done. So what I try to do, and I would want everyone to do, is to roadshow these good ideas, propagate these good ideas. I don't think your organization is going to ever do a good practices webinar. Why not? Do good practices. Why are we discussing ideas here? We should discuss something which has been done and ideate from there rather than discuss only ideas. Discussing ideas is very easy now. If you have the communication skills, if you're glib and you have a great talker, then keep talking endlessly and they are listeners. उनको सुनने में मजा आता है. आपकी वाणी अच्छी हो, आपकी अभिव्यक्ति अच्छी हो, तो बहुत वाले आपके श्रोता मिल जाएंगे, आपको सुनेंगे और बड़े मंत्रमुग्ध होकर जाएंगे, क्या बढ़िया बोला था. The point is, let us try and look at these good practices, and lots of them we can learn from each other. In fact, in the 2 state plans that I'd worked for, J&K and UP, we had actually picked up these ideas from other states and explained in that paper how those ideas can actually be implemented in UP. So it can be done. It's not that it can't be done. Only thing is, it's not sexy enough. It's not visible enough. It won't hit the headlines. जब आप छोटी मोटी काम करेंगे तो हेडलाइन तो कोई करेगी. हेडलाइन तो किसका सर फूटा होगा. अब सर तो आप फोड़ ही रहे हैं, आप तो बिल्ड कर रहे हैं कुछ हल्के हल्के. वैसे भी नेशन वांट्स टू नो ओनली नेगेटिव थिंग्स. कुछ गिर गया है, गिरने वाला. So if that be the case, how? But it can be done because I've seen people do it. I've seen people learn from good work that is happening. What we need to do is to talk more about such models so that others can understand it.
Sir, you have talked about databases in education department, the teachers database, student database, managing transfers online, and what effectively you are talking about is IT in education governance. There is a big program of the Government of India. It's called Digital India, which is actually aimed at increasing IT for bringing transparency and accountability in the government. So are you saying that there is a need for bringing Digital India initiative in the education department, usage of IT based system, artificial intelligence and stuff like that? Are you saying that, sir?
You know me for a long time, and I'm a great believer in use of technology. Great believer. I am convinced that a lot many problems, whether in education or otherwise, even corruption can be sorted out through use of technology. But technology is a tool. The problem is not so much of technology as of attitude. Now you tell me, why aren't all the ministries of the government, why haven't they gone digital? Why we still see files moving in the corridors of the Secretariat? Because the technology is there. I use the technology. We had paperless, fileless existence in coal and then in education. We did it. It can be done. It is being done in a number of departments. Why aren't all are doing? You know, the Prime Minister himself has been repeatedly saying that we should use technology, and I totally agree with him. He wants it. Why isn't PMO gone digital? Why still files are being sent in a hard form to PMO? Let charity begin at home. I've written that in the recent article. If you want to go digital, charity has to begin at home. And I say it. Why is hard file going to the PMO? Now imagine a scenario if the PMO says that I will only receive soft files. I can guarantee all the departments will go digital. Now Prime Minister cannot be expected to carry out everything that he says. The people sitting in the PMO should do it. Why aren't they going digital? Why aren't they pushing the departments to digital? In fact, one reason why Modi had a liking for me was my liking for technology. He liked me for that because of that. Because I feel transparency in the government is critical and that can come through technology. And again, I'm not talking of rocket technology. And by the way, Please be careful about use the word artificial intelligence. Let's use our regular intelligence appropriately. We'll think about artificial later on. I'm not trying to bring down the value of artificial intelligence. It's very important. But we again are discussing ideas. We are talking of artificial. What are we doing to our regular intelligence? Why aren't we putting our regular intelligence to use? Why aren't we using the existing technology? Now, we can graduate to artificial intelligence, but use the existing technology. Now, I don't want to use the existing technology. I will talk of artificial. This is crazy stuff. Why can't we? I mean, the first step that needs to be done in the government is to go totally digital. Every file should be totally dispensed with. The reason is very simple. I want you to become transparent. I don't want me to become transparent. I remember distinctly when I was head of the project monitoring group, one day Kumaramangalam Birla along with whose two MDs came to meet me. And when he saw no file on my table, he said, well, sir, how is it that you don't have any file on the table? I said, I have digitized everything. I said, yes, I don't have a paper or a file. Then he looked towards his two CEOs and asked them, why can't we do it in our offices? Now, I don't blame him because he will have to maintain two documents, this document, that document. For him to become transparent may be difficult. Is that the reason for us not to become transparent? Is that the reason for us not to go digital? If I have nothing to hide, why shouldn't the government offices go digital? They should go digital. And today you have enough security to see people don't get into those digital files. They are as insecure as the file there. You know, one reason why we could carry out this coal block auction, not a finger pointed towards us, was digital use. Not a finger pointed. As PMG head, we cleared projects more than 5 lakh crores. Not a finger pointed during UPR 2. Reason is technology. So we know the advantage of technology. I have recently written an article trying to explain why it doesn't happen. And I think one of the principal reasons is that.
So asking you another question that you have a set of a nexus for good after your retirement, and so what is the objective? Why do what are you trying to achieve?
You know, when I was in service, I was pretty upset with the negativity that was there in the society. Everyone was negative. Nothing can happen. Nothing is happening. So during my tours of the state, I toured 24 states. I visited a school in a place called Pastepada. It is 120 kilometers north of Thane district. It's a government primary school. And I was told it does not have electricity. So I thought, let me visit a school and find out what are the consequences. So I drove into that tribal area, went to the school, and it was a 2-room school. And as I walked into classroom with Sandeep Gund, the school teacher of that school, I found that every child had a tablet. I was shocked. This I'm talking 2017, early 2017. I asked Sandeep Gund, where do you get the electricity from? Because you don't have electricity. He took me around the building, two-room building, and showed me a foldable solar panel. He said, sir, I download, charge my batteries through the solar panels, and through batteries, I charge the tablets. Then the next question was, where do you get the money for tablets? Because the government doesn't give you money. He said, sir, when I came to the school, there were 40, 50 children here, many of whom didn't come, and they were all shapes and sizes. I didn't know what to do with them. So I had a second-hand laptop. I used to play educational videos on those laptops. So these children used to congregate around. They used to get very excited. After 2 months, about 20 parents came to the school asking him a funny question. They asked him, Master Ji, earlier the children never wanted to go to school. Now they run to the school. What have you done? So he explained to them what he did to them. And when he found the parents excited, he requested them to contribute 500 rupees each. Now these were poor people, but they contributed for the children. He bought 2 tablets and attached them to his laptop and made them into 3 groups. Now this passion of the teacher was traveling around. So one day a CSR funding agency and an NGO visited the school, and they saw this passion of the teacher. They couldn't believe it. So they agreed to fund these tablets and the smart screen. Around which time I visited the school. So when I also was very impressed with this guy. So I took a photograph and tweeted it. Suddenly he became a rural hero, a local hero. So other school teachers started visiting Pastepada to see what he's doing. They wanted to replicate it. In the meanwhile, I met the President of India for a different purpose. He had just taken over and I went for a courtesy call as secretary. So while discussing with him, I narrated this incident to him. He was also very impressed. I asked him, would you like to meet him? He said, why not? So I brought Sandeep Gund over to Delhi. He met the president. A photograph was taken. It was tweeted. Sandeep Gund becomes a national hero. Now, this is not the end of the story. The Pastepada model has now been replicated in more than 50,000 schools of Maharashtra. That's when the idea of Nexus Good came in. I said, if you notice a good idea working on the ground, you must appreciate it as much as you can, so that others can also start appreciating it, and then try to replicate it, and then try to scale it. So Nexus Good is all about identifying good practices, understanding good practices, appreciating good practices, replicating good practices, and scaling good practices.
Amazing, sir, amazing. Sir, just to mention that we at Elets have been bringing out this magazine on e-governance, digital learning, e-health, and banking and finance, and exactly about like documenting any of the good projects and highlighting it, so that people talk about projects instead of ideas. Actually, it's more of a
Why don't you host some of the stories on Access Good portal? You don't have to pay anything. Just go to the
of course,
portal, list the story, and do it. That's it. Nothing. It's very simple. Host
yeah,
these. Ravi, we all should jointly try and prove to the world at large that good can happen, because it is happening, and this can be done by highlighting good work that is happening. So if you have good stories, may I request you to host those stories on the portal. No questions asked. No one is asking for any fee, any charge. Just let the world know that here it is. You will get a greater exposure to your stories, and people may get benefited out of the stories that you have.
sure, sir. We will be happy to do that. And that's the objective of the overall this summit. Also, in the World Education Summit, we are bringing some of the teachers, directors of schools, principals, and we are asking them what you are doing in your classroom, what innovation you are doing. So the aim is to actually create those platforms where people actually can learn from each other. That if this can happen in X school, why can't it happen in Y school? So that's the whole idea. And sir, it has been a great session, and always like learning, talking to you, like it's always inspiring, and it opens up the mind. And I have some of the differences of opinion with you on the smart cities, because I feel that there are some success stories, not all success stories, but in some of the cities they have been able to do some good work. And I will be happy to send you some of the documents which I have our team has done on that. But it's okay, which are we need to have some differences anyway. And sir, the last question which I will ask you is that in the pandemic times, schools are closed and the government schools are also closed, and a lot of children are deprived of education because of various reasons, because many don't have connectivity and things like that. Some of the states have gone on using TV for school education. TV is there in many of the schools, but still our TV is available and radio is available, but these mediums are not being effectively utilized by school education departments across the states for school education, which is much needed in the COVID times. You have any suggestions on this?
I agree with you, because this is a very unusual time and there's no substitute for physical education. But the second best model is, how do you reach out to children in the absence of internet and smartphones that they have? About 2 months ago, we had a webinar on Nexus of Good, where various models were being discussed where internet is not available. And we came up, there were some very innovative ways. One teacher was using a loudspeaker in a village, where in a particular point in time, he used to teach on the loudspeaker. And then he would visit each house and give the worksheets and collect the previous day worksheet. A very innovative way of doing it. The other was, there was a guy who used to use a rickshaw, and he used to go from house to house to distribute these pamphlets or worksheets of doing it. Then, of course, as you said, the radio and television are there. But obviously, these can't be substitutes. Even children who have internet and smartphones, they can't become substitutes for physical teaching. But this is beyond your control. You can't do. You have to make the best of what is available. So there are a number of ways in which outreach is being attempted. Let's improve upon it as we go along, till such time we have this COVID going.
So that's exactly that these ideas have to be actually reach out as much possible because these unusual times and people are deprived of education right now. So, sir, with this, sir, if we will close this discussion, and thank you so much, sir, for joining. And we will present a sir, virtual certificate to you here on the screen, just to end this session and saying thanks to you. Aman, yeah, uh, please have this. This is a just a small token of gratitude to you, sir.
Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Namaskar,
Thank you.
sir.